Okay, thank you. So I am an economist. I work at the CNRS and I'm also a lecturer at the Ecole Polytechique. So is it not loud enough? Louder? Sorry. So when I was invited, so I've been working on blockchain and cryptocurrencies for a few years already. So when I was invited to talk here, I was really happy. I say yes, okay, I'm coming. So, and I was asked to talk about the fundamental value of tokens. So in my view, this question is related to two sub-questions in it. So the first one is more fundamental. So what fundamental reason token have value? So it's a question of why. And then if you agree that tokens have value, then the other question that comes, the more practical one, is how do you evaluate this value, this fundamental value? Okay, so I'm going to be just some ideas about it. So I'm going to cover both topics, sketching some idea because I don't think we actually have the answer now. It's still a very young field, and yeah, we don't really know how to answer that clearly. So in management, this is a standard graph that you ask a business holder. It's a very basic test. When you meet a business holder, you give him that graph and you ask him, so do you know what you're doing? Do you know how you're supposed to do it? And do you know why you're doing it? Okay. So obviously, most business owners know what they are doing. That's kind of a basic question. But then when it comes to how, unfortunately, not everyone know exactly how they are supposed to do what they are doing. And then if you ask why, then that's where things get complicated. So people might give you reason, but they are usually not very clear reason of the proposition value they bring to the market. Now my claim is that with tokens, we are really far from answering at least the how and why. So we are still learning how to do it. Okay, it's clear that it's what, 2-3 years that tokens are around. So there is no good practice. Everybody, it's a mess, so it's a zoo, as you said. And everybody does as he feels. And we need clearly to converge toward good practices if we want, in the end, tokens to be recognized as securities. This is clear, I mean. And then the why is even like, I don't think I've ever read any convincing theory of why you should use token instead of venture capital, because that's the question, no? I mean, tokens are an alternative to equity or venture capital, and so why should you use token, no? So you may think they have value, but I can also be very skeptical and tell you it's just a giant bubble. So right now people are speculating and they're going to fade away. And until you can tell me why they are different, I have no reason to believe that this is not a fade. Okay. So as anything blockchain related, my feeling is that we cannot really answer this question because blockchains, and Bitcoin is an example, was not invented through a careful scientific process, no? It was more like an act of intuition and serendipity, no? It's like, we don't really know how Satoshi came with that idea, and he did not write a paper proving that Bitcoin is robust. It just came with the idea. And token is a bit the same. So, and you don't need much imagination. So I like this slide, which is a bit of a joke, but so I think you just need much imagination. You just need like this fantasy where you will go like back to 2010. You walk into a bar and you meet someone, or a man or a girl, nobody knows. And it tells you that he's called Satoshi and that he's broke because he has been working on this crazy project for a couple of years. And if you can pay him a couple of beers, he will give you a couple of 100 Bitcoin. Now, since this is a fantasy, you accept this completely crazy proposition and you take the Bitcoins. And in the end, you become rich. It's the best investment you ever made. So, of course, we cannot travel back in time. But I think what people have in mind is that, okay, Satoshi, this is gone, but I'm going to find the next one. So if this is true, this is a good investment opportunity. We see why people may want to buy coins, because that's really what's going on in their mind. There will be another Bitcoin coming across the street, and if I buy it, I'm going to be rich. But that doesn't really explain why you need to use coin for that. Okay, it's just an imagination, it's just a story. So now when you talk to venture capitalists, startuppers, the advantage, it's not the same, the advantage they see from initial coin offering are obvious. They tell you why they want to do it. It's clear because first, you keep control of the company, you do not dilute the control of the firm. Then you don't risk to go bankrupt, which is amazing, no? And then you receive the money, okay, this is crypto cash, so that's not that great, but okay, you still receive like a couple of million, 10, 20, sometimes more money up front. So this is just great. I mean, this is much better deal than any other financial instrument. Now, on the side of the investors, there are some advantages. So the investment is going to be liquid. So if you invest through venture capital, usually your investment is locked for 5 to 10 years. So this has prevented big funds from moving in. So this has separated the venture capital business from the big investment fund, the pension fund, and so on. So now the pension fund, they are thinking about it. They're like, okay, wait a minute. If I can invest in a startup and it's liquid, why not? Why not buy in a fund or startup? So, and then there is the speculation part, which is obviously a big part of the picture right now. You can make so much money so quickly. Okay, so this, again, these are not reasons. This is why people want to do it, but again, this does not explain why it works. So now the question, as an economist, I'm asking myself is, this sounds too good to be true. So where is the catch? Who is going to get burned or not? And how can that work? And if it works, if it can work, why didn't we think about it before? Because, I mean, finance is a 1,000-year-old industry. Why, like in the last 5 years, suddenly we came with this proposition, which is so great because, I repeat, from the point of view of the startuppers, it has all the advantage. You keep this is the holy grail in the sense that you keep control and you cannot go bankrupt, which is. So you need a debate. I think what we need is an answer to this, and the answer will have to respond to these two questions at the same time. So why can it work? And if so, why we didn't do it before? So the way I will go at it personally, and okay, that's my training as an economist, I will look into the corporate finance literature. So for those of you who don't know what it is, corporate finance is how basically firms structure their financing, okay? So, and here, I'm not teaching you anything. There are two ways to raise fundings. Typically, it's debt or equity. So of course, you have hybrid, some stuff in the middle, but basically these are the two big categories, and you can be more or less debt, more or less equity. Now, you may think, I mean, it's like everything that you see all your life, you forgot to ask why they are there in the first place. But it's not obvious why it should be debt and equity. We could have invented other instruments. They are like, well, okay, that's how we do it, but why do we do it that way? It's not tautological. And the answer that economists give to that is that the problem you have when you invest in a company, so you are the investor, is that you have asymmetric information and moral hazard. So that it can be more, but basically that you can say that. So I give you money, but I don't really know what you're doing with it. So you have a startup, I give you millions, but I don't really know what's going on there. And then you can also be not very honest. You might just consume it for your own purpose, take holidays, or I don't know. So given these two problems, you need to find financing instrument that allows you to overcome the asymmetry in information. And the two ways to do it is either you give someone equities. So you give him equity, he cannot go bankrupt, but then what you're going to require in return is the ability to monitor the firm and to control it to a large extent. So you have voting rights, you sit at the board, you know what's going on. Basically, you're running the firm. Okay, I give you the money, but this is my firm. And of course, startups hate that, no? I mean, you build a project, you give your life to that, and then you have a guy that comes with a few million and he's the boss. This is not why you started in the first place, right? This is not the culture. So that's equity. Now, debt has a very simple answer. Debt is much more simple. You say, okay, I forget about monitoring. You do whatever you want. But then, if you don't pay me back, I'm going to come back and get everything. It's basically the mafia answer, no? It's like, you do whatever you want, but at the end of the month, you pay me. If you don't pay me, this is my place. Well, this is what it is, no? I mean, you don't need to monitor. If the guy pays you, you're happy. The day he doesn't pay you, you take over. Huge punishment, okay? So it's to make things simple, but basically that's the idea. And you see that these are the answers to the asymmetric information problem, right? So now, let's look at tokens. So here I'm thinking, to be honest, of what we may call utility tokens and not really the new brands of tokens, but this is, that's what I'm thinking about. So tokens are really a strange object, and I think that's why you, as a jurist, are a bit confused, because the American and the European don't agree, because one has a more legal and definition, and the other one has a more mean-oriented definition. And so if you look at token, they are like equity, because you cannot go bankrupt. Okay, so that's the big thing of debt, is like if you don't pay back, you go bankrupt, and with token you don't go bankrupt. But they are like debt because you keep control. Okay, so, and this is, again, I repeat, it's the best of both worlds, like, but so there must be this is what's wrong, no? Because if we could do that, we would have done it before. No, corporate finance is not born yesterday. So I don't know if this is going to survive, but my claim is that if this sweet spot is achievable, it's going to be achievable for the following two reasons. The first one is that token value is indexed to revenue instead of profits, and that's very important. So if you think about equity, you get a share of the profits. When you get token, if you have more business, more revenues, if the size of your business goes up, the value of the token goes up. And this is very important because profits are not really observable. Profits are an accounting entity. There are accountants all over the world, huge lawsuits, where people sit at the board and they don't agree about what's happening between the revenue line and the profit line. This is like a big problem. Like, say, no, like here, that's not money. This is a big. So the first, tokens are indexed to something which is much more easily observable, which is, right? And this is important because remember, the issue was monitoring and asymmetric. So you have less asymmetry in information. And the second thing is that the problem was that, the guy, he runs a firm, you have given him the money, maybe he want to mess with you. So basically, if you give him equity, what he's going to do, he's going to pretend he makes no profit, and then he's going to consume everything. So he's going to buy himself a nice flat, a nice car, he's going to hide some of the stuff, and you don't know, and you will have zero profit, although the guy that runs the CEO is enjoying a nice life. So the problem with token is that now it's not indexed to profit, it's indexed to revenue. So the only way to lower the value of the token is not to cheat, is basically to kill your firm, because you have to lower the revenue. Lower the profit doesn't mean you kill your firm. You can have big revenue, you eat it, and then you say, oh, but too bad, I don't have profits. But here, what you need to do to lower the value of the token is lower the revenue of the firm, which is really shooting yourself in the foot. So what I'm trying to say here is that there is a much better alignment of the incentives of the CEO or the startuppers and the investors. So that creates less friction and less tension in the interest. You have aligned the interest. And then the last point, which was why now and not before. So actually, if you think about it, token and this kind of instrument existed. So I don't know the name in English, I should have looked it up, but this is called, in French, you're gonna laugh, but it's called a prêt agricole. And this happened. So like, I don't know, agricultural loan. And so this is what banks have been doing for a long time. So it happened in the countryside. If you have a farm, and you can say, I'm gonna give you 10 or 20% of the production of my farm. Something like that. So it's not indexed on profit, it's indexed on revenues. But this, you could do it when you are a local farm, etc., and the local bank, because you're not going to run away with the land, and the farmer is, by definition, what can he do? And then it's easy to observe how much he's going to harvest, because it's done in a cooperative, so you observe exactly what he does. So the point is that you needed a good monitoring technology. And here, that's where the blockchain enters, because the blockchain is a monitoring technology, right? It's really something, if it's in the blockchain, you can observe it, it's credible, etc., etc. So that might be why it did not happen before on a large scale, because we didn't really have the monitoring technology to make it happen. So my bottom line is that tokens have aligned the incentive of firms and investors, which maybe solves part of the problem, and then we have a better monitoring technology. I'm not saying it's true, I'm saying these are like maybe direction like which will tell us that ICO will survive. And an implication for a good ICO is that it requires, if it works, it has to be transparent and credible in the monitoring technology, because that's the only thing that's new. Otherwise, I don't see how it can work, okay? Because this is precisely the friction that blockchain is supposed to. And actually, I was reading that I just received during the talk an email. There is a paper in the NBR which shows that ICOs which have a more credible and transparent white paper will raise much more money. So I can say, so this has been tested and they found it. So it seems to be true. So I don't know. I have like 5 minutes or yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I wanted now. This is the why. So I mean, I'm not saying I have the answer. That's the way I think about it. I think we should dig in that direction. And then there is a question of how to do it. So there is a big issue of utility versus investment tokens. So I think, Vincent, you're going to cover this stuff, and I'll leave it to you. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the pricing model, because the thing that also blows my mind as an economist is that when you talk to people doing ICO, they say, I want 20 million, and then they say, okay, then let's put the 10,000 token, and they divide. And then you ask them, why is the price of the token this? They say, oh, because I want 20 million. But this is like, I mean, it doesn't tell you what's the value of the token. It's completely weird. Any financial instrument, if we want to be a serious business here, we need to have at some point some business model we can come and say, okay, this is how we priced our stuff. We didn't pull it out of thin air. Otherwise, this will never compete with standard financial instruments. This is clear, okay? So we need a pricing model. And what people are using is a quantity theory of money, MV equal PY. So M is the monetary mass in euro. V is the velocity of the money, so the speed at which the money circulates. P is the price of the service, and Y is the quantity demanded by the service. So the stuff on the right-hand side is basically what people ask on your platform. So you make a ICO, you have a platform. This is going to be your business. So we don't need to explain that. What we want to explain is M and V. So V is the speed at which it circulates, and M is how much your tokens are worth, the value of your. So if you divide by the number of tokens, you're going to get the value per token. So people, I found it funny because there is some blogs where people are like, yeah, you know, economists, they are so old school. They don't know how to do it. They use this asset pricing equation, but they should use the quantitative theory of money, and this is the future. Now, the thing is, the quantity theory of money is going back to Copernicus, seemingly. I read that. So it's 500 years old. It's one of the oldest ever equations in economics, maybe the first one ever written. So there is really nothing new about the quantity theory of money. And it has been discarded and abandoned by economists for a very good reason. Okay, it's not that we don't know it, it's that we know that it's crap. And so why is it problematic? Because you have one equation and you have two endogenous variables. So this is not a determinate system. M is endogenous, is the value of your economy, and V is the velocity of money, which is also endogenous, how fast the money circulates. So what people do, and I mean, that's what I could see when they price their ICO, and that's what I do. So, okay, I'm not criticizing myself, but they fix the velocity of money, say, oh, it's 1 or 2 or 3. But this is not science or anything, no? They just take a number they want to believe in, right? So I think but this is not, so what I'm saying is that the quantity theory of money is a good starting point, because this is an accounting identity. It's always true. If you think about it, the total spending is equal to the value of the monetary base times the speed at which the money circulates. It has to be true. It's an identity. So it's going to be true and it's going to be useful, but we need a bit more because we need to understand where the velocity of money is coming from. We need the theory. So that's basically what I'm saying is we need a second equation because we have two endogenous variables. And I don't think it's impossible to do. I think we just have to think about it, go beyond the quantitative theory of money, and propose models that endogenize the velocity of money, endogenize the speed. So once we can do that, and I think this could be done in a few years, we will have micro-funded pricing model, and it's not going to solve everything, but at least it will start to make it possible to benchmark and rate ICOs, because at the moment everybody has this point of view. We need rating agency, we need benchmarking, we need standards if we want the industry to take off. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Hey, Yeah, you've said we've never seen something similar to ICOs before, and actually I mostly agree with everything you said. But I wanted to suggest a thought experiment. Suppose you have a country, a new country that comes to exist, and they have nothing, but they say we are going to have a great country with infrastructure on it that everyone can interact with, build business, transact, and we launch our currency. Well, to me, it's exactly the same as what Ethereum did. They said we launch a new platform with which everyone will be able to interact, build smart contracts, build their business, and we launch a currency. And as you say, in fact, then the value of the currency really depends on the revenue you expect to see within that economy. So I do agree with your analysis. But I just wanted to say, like, do you see a fundamental difference between that sort of experiment where you have a new country setting up a new infrastructure and proposing a currency to, say, international investors, and the proposition that Ethereum made, for example? Do you think it's radically different? Because I don't really see the difference there.
But I don't really see actually a practical example of what you said.
Well, suppose I said my third experiment was a bit radical. It was about a country that just comes to exist. Yeah. But you can reproduce that idea with a country that exists and say we're going to print more money. And then that money will be able to be used within our economy, within our infrastructure. It's a bit the same. That,
but except if you live in a communist country where the states own everything, which is not what's happening now, because most of the tool of production are not owned by the state.
Sure.
The money is not a stake on the tool of production, but yeah, in some sense. So I agree, and then I think, so my feeling, at least with economists, is that they are all focused on the money thing, and I believe that now we are not really talking about money in the crypto world, we are talking about financial instruments. So I think we should see the real comparison is really debt and equity. Because fiat money, nobody can issue fiat money. The state can issue fiat money, and we could be there all day long and discuss about what's different about fiat money. What we are doing now with ICO, we are not mini states. Because the judge, if we do crazy stuff, the judge is going to come to us. And so we are not a law in ourselves. So we are issuing financial instruments. That's the world we are operating in, I think.
Okay, I think first we should clarify the terminology, because you speak about ICOs in general.
Yeah.
Now that might reflect current market practices, that's a mixed bag. But I was thinking about Ethereum or a platform that's general in purpose.
It's really like a financial instrument. So you have a new platform, and but I agree. I'm not saying I disagree. I'm just saying I think we should more compare it. So Bitcoin is comparable probably to money, but the other stuff to me is more comparable to financial instrument where you finance a platform.
Yeah, I agree with you if we look at the whole universe of ICOs. I really completely agree with you. Okay. But I was more looking at Bitcoin or things like that.
Bitcoin is a weird thing. Yeah, Bitcoin is another thing. It's not very clear what Bitcoin.
Thank you. Bruno.
Shut me up if you want. So we'll keep on the good questions. I'm finishing my slides.
Good, thank you. So I liked your talk a lot. I thought it was very interesting. And I think maybe related to your question, it seems to me, I may be wrong, that you're pointing at three aspects. One is the fact, if you compare it to a share, if you compare it to a share, you're selling a fraction of the profits, while when you sell a token in an ICO, you're selling a voucher. Yeah. That enables people to access the service. Yeah. So that's one difference. Yeah. And there's a second difference is you're putting this on a blockchain, and so that it becomes something that is observable and maybe something that you can commit to. Yeah. That's the second difference. Yeah, and the third difference is this token, you should be able to resell it. Mm-hmm. So I think you actually laid the emphasis on the resaleability, which is the fact that it's something that people can trade, but actually you mentioned the three things, and I thought that was very interesting that you did so. And one of the many things that is not clear in my mind is there an interaction between those three dimensions, and what is it?
Yeah, no, I'm just starting to think about that. So I think this is really something we have to dig. And yeah, so one thing which is puzzling, so if I want to say something very quickly, so we had so liquidity, normally when you have an asset which is liquid, is that there is not much asymmetric information. So that's something that economists think, is that a market which is very liquid is a market where there is very little asymmetric information. So this is why Bitcoin is liquid, by the way, because nobody knows nothing about Bitcoin, because there is no real value to Bitcoin. So why do you need symmetry in information? Because if you meet someone that sells you something and you think he has a better information, you think, oh, he's gonna trick me. But if you think he has no more information than you, you're not worried, okay? So liquid market typically should be market where there's so the most liquid market is the bond market. The government bonds. There is very little asymmetric information because the state is not going, you know, money, nobody knows. What is weird with ICO is that they are liquid. And there is a lot of asymmetric information. With a new project, I mean, who knows, except the 5 guys. So this is a bit strange. So this combination of liquidity and very early project is a bit like, and it's strange. And I think this is going back to your question, how they interact and so on. But I don't know, I mean, this is just thoughts. These are just thoughts, I mean, I don't know.
Any other question?
First, thanks, because you like pushed all of my buttons or something like this. There is so many things in your presentation that is very stimulating, actually, to think about things in a different way. I have so many questions, so I'm going to try to take it from one step back. And it seems when you talk that you consider greed is the only valid human motivator.
Sorry? The Homo economicus, that's how we...
That's it. And so that's very interesting to think that the way I see it is probably not the truth either, but it's just, I'm seeing really a new model of interactions. And I don't think in ICOs greed is a massive motivators. There is something about trust, there is something about wanting to recreate new kind of interactions, and there is kind of a dreamer, idealistic kind of things, which goes with also greedy people. But for example, when you say ICO is liquid, what do you mean? When you buy a token on the ICO, you don't even know when it's gonna be on the market. You don't even know if it's ever gonna be on a tradable market. Like, except EOS maybe that was traded before the ICO was finished, but most ICOs I have invested in, we don't even know which platform is going to trade them, so it's completely not liquid. Or
but, can I answer to that? Yeah, I mean, it's a question of degree, you're right, but still tokens, the first token were issued like 3 years ago, or what? 3-4 years?
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty recent, and there's still a market with hundreds of tokens traded. So the average lifetime for a venture capitalist is 10 years to market. A venture capitalist waits 10 years on average to bring to market. So it's true that you wait 2 years, but this is nothing. And then after 2 years, you're immediately liquid. In venture capital, it's like 5 years for the first dilution of... So I'm not saying it's... And of course, because we have example of people who have bought immediately, and then there was no condition of you had to keep the token, and then they sold immediately back and killed the... So we know that... Yeah,
most token, when they get traded first, they lose tons of value. And,
I think you live in that world and you think it's slow, but it's still very fast compared to the world of standard finance. Comparatively,
I get that, but standard finance is for people who have a certain status and you see what I mean? So it's very on a social level, it's a very different population of investors.
But in the US, you know that you need at least 1 million equity to invest in venture capital. It's illegal for normal people. Yeah. No, I'm not, okay, maybe... it was misunderstood. I'm not criticizing because I work on it, so I think it's interesting. I'm just saying these are the... But I agree, I'm not saying this is perfect, the alternative. But I think it's still more liquid, much more liquid than standard venture capital.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I think you have it right to put it in the framework of asymmetric information. That's exactly the main issue that we see in financing industries. There's a couple of financial instruments that been looking at reproducing the tokens, like in project finance. When you finance infrastructure, you don't get a share, or you don't get something that you can own. It's really the project. It will be delivered like a bridge or something, and then you have the revenue, and it's really revenue based. The other thing as well is quite more recent is royalty funding, or RBF, revenue-based financing. This is something quite famous in the crowdfunding arena. It's not that popular, but it's very high in the US.
Okay.
And in the Islamic finance industry as well, there's something called sukuk, which is exactly what a token is. It's basically, it's not an equity, it's not a debt. It's something that gives you the share of the value creation without owning a share or something. So that has been widely used in the Islamic finance industry. There's a lot of big corporates that use them, and that's something probably interesting to analyze. One final point is, I'm not sure though that the token really resolving the issue of alignment of interest, but because as a startups, if I don't risk the dilution control or risk of failure, at the end of the day, yeah, I can have a good technology of monitoring technology, but I'm not incentivized to do the best and perform best for the interest of the investors.
I agree. No, but I completely agree. So I'm saying it might help solving the problem. I don't think it goes all the way, and that's where we need to work, maybe with a combination of other instruments. I don't know. I completely agree with that.
I'm not totally agree with the fact that people on startup who raise money on ICO don't need to play the rules and trying to accomplish the promises, because the ICO is just the first part of the funding the society, the company. The most interesting thing with ICO is once you have the token is to make it increase in value. So the startups the startup is incentivized to increase the token value, so they need to deliver what their promises.
Yeah, no, but that's what I was saying. The value of the token will be proportional to the growth of the business, which is why it's a good incentives. But there's still the risk that if you get 20 million, you go to the Bahamas and you retire, no?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
what is the law? What can happen to you? That's a risk, no? I mean, it's a joke, but you see what I mean. I mean.
I think here we get lost. We get sidetracked to the market practice, which is perhaps. I mean, I think here the debate is sidetracked because you say, okay, if you get 20 million, you might leave to the Bahamas. Tempting, I must say, but in reality, it's okay. Perhaps now the investor haven't demanded enough from the entrepreneurs in the market, but possibly now tomorrow they'll ask more vesting or more sophisticated incentive mechanisms and so on, right? But that's really a market outcome that's very different from thinking about the fundamentals of ICOs, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. So it's gonna happen.
Because
So maybe.
Any last question for Vincent? You ready?
Yeah, it's true.
Okay, so we can have one last question or not? Okay, well, thank you very much, Julien.